Meeting is recording in progress. Got it.
All right, you're all set. I'm going to mute myself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our panel. We are Sound Girls Presents Ask the Experts in Game Audio. I'm joined today. I'm Bonnie Bogovich, joined by two wonderful women, Emily Mio and Danny Oberly, and we're happy to be here. I guess we'll do quick introductions. Hi, I'll be moderating the panel today. Bonnie Bogovich, former audio lead at Schell Games, currently running my own audio production company studio called BlackCatBonifide LLC out of Austin, Texas. My specialties are in voice, vocal production, and sound design. And I've worked on things as bizarre and funny as VR games like I Expect You to Die, as puzzly and educational as a game about tardigrades called The Water Bears. And I recently played a demon in Hell Architect. So happy to be here. I'll be leaning a little bit more on the vocal side of the spectrum to try to balance things out. Emily, introduce yourself.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Bonnie. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I am a sort of freelancing game audio generalist. I've worked in the casino spheres, the indie spheres, and I'm currently in the AAA sphere. I am contracting at Arcane Austin, working on Redfall, which is like an immersive shooter with a lot of vampires, and that is about all I can say about it without breaking my NDA. I also had a stint at Certain Affinity. I worked on a bunch of casino games, which I doubt many of y'all have played. I did get to work on a Buffy casino game once, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so that was fun. And before that, I worked on my first AAA game was Transformers: Rise of the Dark Spark. And I think that's pretty much the heavy hitters in my past.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. And Danny.
Hi, I'm Danny Oberly. I'm sound designer. I currently work at BioWare, which is a subsidy of EA. You may know me from such titles as Star Wars: The Old Republic, Mass Effect Andromeda, Anthem, and I'm currently working on a new Dragon Age game, which I'm very excited about, and that's all I can say without breaking my NDA. I also, my first game job was at Gearbox, and I've also worked at a few post houses. I've done some like stuff in the kind of corporate AV and like lives, like backline stage kind of work. And I love field recording, so I'm really happy to answer any questions you have about field recording and Foley, and questions about like microphones or ultrasonic recording. There's tons of topics we could talk about here today. I'm sure we'll run out of time, but I'm really excited to be here with these two amazing women.
And I'll unmute myself. And because we three have been very busy ladies over their career, I have shared links to our bios and everything else in case you want to do more of a deep dive. But as those of you who signed up saw, there was a little handy question form that you all filled out when you registered, and holy cow, you had quite a lot of questions. So I did my best as our moderator to take about 70 layers of questions, peruse them down as best I could, and we're going to do our best to try to get to as many of them as we can. So yeah, let's start at the top. How did we get into the business, or how did we get involved with the gaming side of the audio industry? Who wants to take this one first?
Well, I said something first, so I guess
yeah, you
I
have
will.
to go now.
So I guess it is possible to think about it as like the audio industry, and then there is a gaming part, but that's just never really how I thought about it. It's the gaming industry, and then there is an audio part within the gaming industry. And I knew, like, pretty much from the beginning that I wanted to be in games, specifically in audio for games. As for how I got in, I mean, there aren't like a ton of college programs that you can like go through and then you come out the other side and you're just like automatically qualified, you know? You have to build up a lot of things on your own, even beyond getting a degree. just things like, being a good sound designer and knowing your way around middleware and soft skills, being able to play well with others. And then on top of that, you also need to network, like a lot of networking.
We might touch on that a little bit later too.
Yeah.
It's a very important skill, like you said.
For sure. It's
Yeah.
huge.
I mean, to follow that, I think each one of us could go on a really long story about how we got into industry, because it's going to be really wildly different for everyone.
Yeah.
When I started, people really still pushed kind of towards the concept of internships, but I think those are sort of not as common. But even with an internship, or part of an internship is you need to, like Emily said, build up a body of work. And you can use some of your student projects towards that. You should always have that as like a goal, even though some of that stuff is definitely not going to be your best work. And it's going to be what you have in the beginning, right? So start there, networking, find your advocates, meet people, and like follow up with them, get their advice. And if they give you advice and you're going to follow up with them again, or let them know that you took that advice and tried it and follow up with them. If they give you advice and then you like see them a year later and you didn't follow their advice, they're probably not going to advocate for you later on. But yeah, for me, I ended up with 2 different internships, and I had been networking with someone I did an informational interview with in college, which is something you can do. You can just like message people and see if anybody responds and is willing to like give you advice or talk to you. And they were able to let me know about something that was coming up, short-term contract at Gearbox. And so I was able to like do that. And that sort of leads to one thing, led to sort of another thing. Then I guess there was, what was it? How did we get it? Was the question, how do we get into the business?
It was how did you get in?
And the gaming side.
And also, like, did you know, I guess, when you were going to school or building your work, did you have games like?
This is a funny question for me.
Because I have my answer is very different from I know whatever you're about to say.
Well, so what's funny for me is that for a lot of people, they do always know that they want to do games. For me, I am actually more of the mind that like I'm an audio artist first and a game dev second. And everybody will have sort of a different scope on that. But I knew that I wanted to do like music and technology. And then I went to college and I started working with bands and I found out that I hated that. And I was like, what am I going to do? Well, this is all I thought I wanted to do, because I had been, running sound at my church and volunteering at festival, and I loved it. But, I wasn't sure then. And I talked to one of my professors and like, oh yeah, but there's all this other stuff you can do. And I was like, oh, suddenly it was so obvious to me, like, yeah, you can do sound for games and everything. And so then I really was like, no, I definitely want to do post or games, and I want to tell that story. And I was really into the car scene for a long time. And I was like, man, my dream would be to like make sound for Forza or something like that.
I was going to say that would be like perfect.
Yeah, that was like my ultimate dream forever, was to be able to like do that. And like, I still love like recording cars and stuff like that. So for me, it was like not quite that obvious. And like, it feels a little like weird to say that, because a lot of times, people start out always wanting to like pursue that. But for me, I always knew I wanted to do audio, and games was like an avenue where I felt like I could really like love that and do that and like tell a good story. So it was more that you do find a lot of people in the game industry that got in through like bizarro sideways channels. So
totally.
That'll be
you may be very focused, but you may also have no idea. And with that, Bonnie, tell us your story.
I got into the game industry through Fake Blood and a zombie opera. So I went to school for a double degree in music composition and also a master's in multimedia, because they were running an experimental 4-1 program where I was loving both sides of everything, but I was more of a multimedia nerd. And if you survived basically your first year of being a music tech, you could start taking masters at Duquesne University in multimedia on your second year. And what that did was, because I was lucky enough to have gone to a high school that had a really good computer program. And I was one of those nerds who stayed in the AV club all the time and like made skits and things and played around with Adobe Premiere and really, really bad rotoscoping with pixels everywhere. And I already had a little portfolio that let me qualify. So that let me get a leg up and skip ahead to the more challenging multimedia courses while I was still doing like a big music composition program. And while I was in there, I thought, oh man, what I want to do is like my dream job would be to work for a Blue Man Group. and help create music timed click track based projection visuals that all go to music and pair and project behind people and do like cool things. And there's a blue screen and I don't know, lasers shoot out. And I designed some things like that through school. And my final projects were very multimedia based and things surrounding you and music and this and that. And when I popped out, I actually, one of my main jobs was I went right back into theater because I did stage crew in high school. And I took my theater love from there, plus my multimedia skill. And I toured for a while as a multimedia designer for the opera scene and for dance companies. And as I was working for these companies, I started picking up side jobs doing exhibit multimedia stuff for like museums and cleaning up audio for like postcards from the Civil War and not the Civil War, but like World War II, and taking all the scratches out and making cool like panning visual things. So I was always looking, you were talking like the big picture, telling a story, the whole, I saw everything as a whole, and everything to me kind of all comes down to being it's all a performance. Even when you're in a game, you're the audience and it's all a performance. It's just digital and it's all around you. And I started to write a show because I lived in Pittsburgh, which is the home of George Romero and the Night of the Living Dead films. And I formed a multimedia production called Evenings in Quarantine, the Zombie Opera, which was a 4D multimedia performance where we filmed a zombie movie that was timed to a click track that was a musical, and the stage performers were in front. The movie happened in the back. Everything was on click. And then at the end of the whole show, zombies come from behind the audience and you get like a whole super submersive thing. People are singing, screaming, fake blood's everywhere, huzzah. And the reason I'm like, this is the pivotal moment is some of my extras worked at a game studio down the street called Schell Games in Pittsburgh. And they had a blast being part of this crazy production thing because they had their kids in it. Their kids are like covered in blood and some of the footage going, "Bleh." And some of them are part of my stage extras, like clawing the audience at the end, and they had a good time. And I did all the mixing of the orchestra as well for the show. So they knew me as one of the heads of this production company that could put on this weird thing that had audio and this and could match visuals. And an opening popped up for an audio person at Schell Games. So I was like, I don't have any game stuff, guys. I don't have, they're like, you did a freaking zombie opera. This is like, you have to understand all the moving parts that are actually relevant to gaming. And I typed up my museum work, other gigs I'd done film, like independent stuff. I was a big fan of the 48-hour film projects, which I hope some of you people out there have been members of. And I thought, okay, and I wrote down like spreadsheets, organization, editing, sure, sound, pick up this and blah. And I got in and I started as a contractor and then was hired on full time, and I was there for 5.5 years. And it was kind of a learning curve once I got in, but it was very obvious right away. Like Danny was saying, many people in that studio did not go to school for games. They did not specifically have a gaming thing. One of the head producers was from the Army. Another guy used to do architecture. One of the head writers got in because he wrote an interactive play about ninjas. And he hadn't done games, but he did interactive live theatrical performances about ninjas fighting each other. And it's like, it all feeds together. And having all those different backgrounds really makes a stronger, more creative team. So I got in through fake blood, zombies, and a passion for weird theater. But yeah, and I don't know.
That's kind of the same, I think, though. I think I'm with them. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the same thing.
Same thing, because yeah, and then museum stuff. Heck, my work in museums, which sometimes was like, we had an exhibit of the Abraham Lincoln top, like he has those big hats, right? Yeah. And there was an exhibit of the hats. They were touring through all the Smithsonian museums at one point. It came through Pittsburgh, and I had to design an interactive setting in one of the halls because it was a rainy day when Abraham Lincoln gave this one speech. We had his voice coming out of one speaker system over there. I created the ambiance of the rain above your heads with like fake clouds, all of that. If you ever look at a game with an open world or anything with a 3D spatialization, it's the same thing. You're just not walking into it in an actual space. You're creating an immersive experience digitally. So yeah. Oh, and soft skills came up. I know Emily said something about soft skills.
Yes, I did say something about soft skills.
Prepared me, that was a really good standout thing on my resume when I did apply, was teamwork, because I had been on a lot of independent film projects, and 48-hour film, if anyone's ever done that, you have a deadline, you have restrictions, you have your team that you're assigned to, and you can't change it once you start because it's too late, and no matter what, you ship at the end. And like, having survived a couple of those, and those videos being on YouTube was like, hey, boom, portfolio material. But it proved and no one died on the teams because we all got along. So it was also good too.
I think it's worth mentioning, the 48-hour film projects are really, really good to do. But if you want to get into, honestly, I think they're good to do even if games is the eventual goal. But there are also game jams.
Yes.
Which are a excellent way to sort of like build up your portfolio, or even just like test out new ideas. A game jam is essentially it could be in person or it could be online. It is a set amount of time in which a bunch of devs have to make a game, usually with a theme. A really big one is Global Game Jam, happens once a year, every year. It's what is it? It's like 72 hours.
It's about the same as the 48. You just have more time to review the game when it's done.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
Sunday is like everyone plays it and you get judged.
Yeah, but you still have like Sunday morning to like work out those last bugs and submit. But yeah, it's you get a theme at the beginning of it, and everybody divides up into teams, or if you want to solo dev it, you totally can. There aren't really like rules or anything. It's kind of up to you. And hopefully by the end of it, you have a working prototype game. And if you don't have one of those, then at least maybe you made some friends and had a good time.
And
you're networking.
You're networking. Right.
Yeah. Because even if those connections don't pay off from the beginning, they might pay off later. And I know for me, like, I haven't actually done a game jam, but I've like volunteered to like help students on some of their game jams. And I know that when I'm talking to the students, I'm like, the ones that are in groups are the ones I usually want to talk to more, and the people who solo dev. Like, it's cool to see that on like a portfolio. You should still like do that with yourself, or if you need those boundaries to like force you to like do it in 24 hours or whatever, because that's sort of just another day in the life. Every once in a while, cinematic or something is going to fly across your desk, and they're going to be like, oh God, we need this, really quickly. And so that's just going to be what you do on the day-to-day. Or you'll be in college and you'll lose your project and have to redo it in class that day.
Oh no.
But I think
the teamwork is really like seeing that, like, you got together with 4 people under panic and pressure, and you made decisions and you figured something out, and you didn't kill each other by the end. Like, that's good to me.
And I think that most industries recognize that the Global Game Jam exists too. So they'll count that as a legitimate portfolio thing, because by the end, something goes up and it's global, and a lot of pro people actually participate. Whenever I was at Schell, we actually would remind everyone on staff to go sign up for the Global Game Jam each year, so that people could still go and compete and have a little bit of fun over the weekend, or partner themselves with newbies or people who are still in school. And what's nice is I'm pretty sure you can still do it all from online. You don't have to have a base city to sign into to attend. Though, depending where you live, I posted the link in the chat. You can look up your city, and hopefully after COVID is less scary, there are usually meetups held by different environments, and you can go into a room, and I highly recommend you to be that person who puts the little sign over their head that says audio person, because man, it's kind of I don't want to say a trend, but usually that is one of the least represented people or departments at a Global Game Jam. And once people see that, they're like, oh no, we need an audio person. We didn't even think about sound. And suddenly you are the most valuable person in that room. So just be prepared if you're looking for teams to dive in, and be expected to be scared if you've never done it before, but you'll learn a lot. And even if it doesn't work out, like, you'll still have that experience of, well, that's what happens when a whole game falls apart.
Yeah.
And I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, definitely a lot of pros do Global Game Jam. I think I've done Global Game Jam every year of my professional life. And I just wanted to say that like one option that you do have if you show up at a game jam and there aren't that many audio people is you can take on multiple projects. Be careful with that. You don't want to overburden yourself. You don't want to burn yourself out. But I've definitely done game jams where I've taken on multiple projects and it helped me keep busy the whole weekend and helped me reach even more people. But on the other hand, I've also done global game jams where I just focused on one project and put a lot of polish in. And those are the years where I would win best audio at that site.
Yeah.
So
it's hard.
It's a trade-off.
It's hard not to want to grab everything. And I've been that person where one year I was on 4 projects and I was like, I'll just do it all. But you do seem to have the most fun when you actually do line yourself up and you have a good team and you can really put in that extra work. And getting a little plaque is really nice. Even
A
if
little
it's-
plaque.
I feel like there's something to be said there overall, just kind of with the industry too, right? Like that's usually when people do their best work. Like we can do 4 things at once for a while,
Mhm.
but when we do our best work is when we're focused on the task at hand and we can just really concentrate on that one thing.
Definitely.
I think I'm gonna try to move us ahead because we got really important stuff, but I want to make sure we still get to some
We're
other
gonna be here
topics.
for like 7 hours.
Yeah.
What are the different careers in game audio? And are there any opportunities for engineers interested in game audio, but who are not sound designers?
Okay.
When
well,
you say engineer, do you mean do you think
like-
they mean sound engineer or like do they mean like
Well,
mechanical
programmer.
engineer?
I
Yeah,
think
programmer.
they probably mean audio engineer because it's actually are the opportunities for engineers interested in game audio, but who are not sound designers. And for that, I would read like, depending on studio size, being a great mixer and not actually a sound designer, but someone who is a pro on mics and recording setups can be very valuable.
It depends on
Yeah.
the studio. My in my experience, like there's a lot of studios out there who don't necessarily invest a lot in audio. They, keep the team pretty small. And I know a lot of audio developers who just kind of end up having to wear a lot of hats. They're going to be the
Mhm.
ones who mix everything. They're going to be the ones doing all the Foley work. But like the bigger a studio gets, like you get to Sony level, you get to Naughty Dog level, then yeah, they're gonna have dedicated people. And
Yeah.
and that's totally an option. Probably pretty hard to get those jobs, but like that
Yeah.
is totally an option.
And also
Also,
to, go ahead.
like if you work and like there are like VO outsource companies
Yes, I was
out
about
there.
to-
Like if you want to just
Yeah, I
work
was
on the
gonna say that.
VO side, you could join one of those as an engineer and just focus on recording and mixing
Yeah.
voiceover.
I mean, there are a variety of studios, especially out in LA, I know, that specifically specialize just in voice recording and soundtrack mixing for big game studios and also film. And they make a ton of money, but those are for the projects that have the budget to do that.
Yeah.
Like Emily said, sometimes you're in a company where, for example, when I was at Schell, I was the only person in the audio department for 4 years of my 5.5 years. And the company grew, but they kept audio near the bottom level. And eventually I did get an assistant who was hired on, but when it's only 2 people and sometimes we weren't even on the same projects and I was usually assigned to 8 things, you can only focus so much. But if there's a larger studio, one guy's job is maybe just removing all the spit out of Ellen McLean. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, there's
I'd
something
love to
be
be that
said-
person.
I know, I actually really like editing voice.
Yeah.
There's something to be said too, like there may be small studios where like you can get that in because you know someone or you're willing to like, just like work on a little indie project here or there if you're able to like pick something up that's like, like a small thing that you're doing for like not that much money, or even maybe just sort of like a free for fun thing like a game jam or a mod or something with like a friend or yourself. Like as an engineer, I don't know if like the person who submitted that question is more like a live sound engineer or like a studio recording engineer, but like you have all of these technical skills already, right? You understand signal flow, you're working in the same software. So it's just sort of about, you may be layering sounds together if you're already doing sound design in the studio. So work on a few of those things and maybe a small studio will get you in, but also like with a big studio, like my first in at Gearbox, they actually hired me to like edit their sound library down because their sound library had just gotten crazy. But then as soon as I was there, audio is almost always it's always understaffed. It is
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
understaffed.
Yes.
And, you know, outsourcing companies are one thing that we're using to help alleviate some of that are getting more and more popular. So those could be a great in. But they were like, well, can we use her to do this? And like, I was able to pick the software up really quickly because it's like all the concepts are the same. And it was the same, like when I went to doing like focus on just doing live sound after having been like a post and like game sound designer for a lot of years, and I started like doing freelance stuff with like stage stuff. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know exactly how to hang a display array, but like you can tell me once because I get it really quickly. So I was able to like pick up those jobs and learn that stuff a lot more quickly. So the inverse is true. And like if you get really good at like implementation, a lot of the bigger studios like a Sony or place like that, they might just have mixed engineers or people that just do implementation. So there are options like more directly and then also like a bit more indirectly. I think it's about building that work and that body of work and that network and just like keep trying, you know, trying some things out. Like you've already got some of the skills, so there could be an inroad for you somewhere.
And sometimes you don't even know what skills you don't have until you've tried it. I mean, that's one of those things, like I was in house where it was like, everything's on you. And then when I formed my own thing and you start working for bigger companies, like I have some AAA clients and stuff, you can finally specialize and go, well, I've done, you know, A through D, but I really liked working on C and E. And I'm just going to do that now, since that's where my joy is. And that's where I work the best. And then you find other collaborators. I subcontract out to other colleagues who have the strengths in the areas that I knew that I was never as quick. And it comes down to, again, the network, building that network of going to conventions and working on other projects and meeting other people who work in game audio, keeping those connections fresh. So if there ever is an opportunity where you can bring them on, you could be like, well, I'm not so good at this, but I know 3 people who are really good and can rock it in half the time. And one thing you learn when you're on a team is production. They see dollar signs. No matter what happens, there's a budget for a game that has to be shipped, and it breaks down to hours, how expensive those hours are, and how quick can something get done. If it takes you 20 hours to do one task, but if you contracted someone else and would take them 2, show them that information, those charts, and it really helps a lot, because in the end, their big thing is the big picture. Yeah, and you as a team player want to help get the game done on time.
Right. And also like when it comes to production and budgets and that kind of stuff, like a company sees a full-time hire as a different cost than a temporary full-time hire than an outsourcing cost. And a lot of times they're more willing to work with an outsourcer or an individual for a short amount of content, even if it's more dollar signs than like, you know, you in the chair, because they see it as a one-time finite cost that they can control and understand and charge directly towards a budget.
And they don't have to mix in healthcare and a lot of other things that.
I mean, companies, I've heard numbers like, you know, we see an employee, it's like $1 million investment over 10 years or something, versus like we see contracting a huge company like, you know, like a Formosa or something as like X, or a Sony as like, you know, X $100,000. I'm making these numbers up. I have no idea what they actually are, but they're big numbers, right? Like when you're talking about making like something as big as like a AAA title, even an indie title, like, I mean, it says indie title, those numbers get big quickly. Like it costs a lot of money to, you know, record people in a studio and hire actors, and music as its own huge dollar sign item. It requires,
absolutely.
you know, recording live music, you're talking about 50 people all being paid to do something really amazing on set for a whole day.
Yeah, and also it depends too if there's vocals involved, or if you want to use a big name to perform anything, or if you're hiring, I don't know, singers who are local to your city, and you have to work out, it's all budget, but what's the big picture and what's the goal, and is the soundtrack going to be something they want to highlight at the end? Or is it something that you as a composer are going to license on your own and you have a deal with the company? There's a lot of different ways to work that out. Before we lose this topic, someone also asked a more specific thing along kind of going back to sound design instead of the engineering thing. Someone posted, hi, I have a lot of sound design experience in forms of theater, and someone posted audio for film, and I'm really interested in spatial audio, but every single sound design job I see wants you to have at least one AAA job title shipped. How do we get that experience without having a job in sound design?
I got this.
Go, Emily.
First of all, every time you see that on a job posting, I want you to pretend it's not there. Just ignore it.
Yep.
Because listen, here is the thing. And this is a very gendered behavior that we hear about quite a lot. It is very, very common for a woman, a non-cis dude, to look at a job posting and see like, okay, I could do that, I could do that, I can do that. And then you see like 1 or 2 lines that don't apply to you. Like, oh, I haven't shipped this many games. And oh, I haven't worked on this. I guess I would not get hired for this job. I will pass on it. I won't even apply and then move on to the next thing. Meanwhile, dudes will just apply to whatever. They'll be like, oh, I don't know how to do this. Who cares? Have an application.
Unless you're me, I applied to everything. Back when you had to mail out CDs and resumes,
I
think I mailed out like 100.
I mailed out zip discs.
Oh my God.
Because once I had something too big for a CD. Because remember,
home printed labels, like walking around, literally just handing them out like I'm slinging my rap demo on the bus.
I am so glad that we don't have to live like that anymore.
But I will confirm, I've been on the hiring side for interns and also assistant positions before, and it's incredible how many applications I got when I was looking for an assistant sound designer that had nothing to do with sound design, and were often, I play piano, and that would be it. And they were more often than not some dude, and they thought that would be fine. And I'm like, did you even read? And I got a sprinkling of women who did say, I do not have something, but I'm willing to learn, and I'm great on picking up new technology. And honestly, that's all I need to know, is if you don't know something, but you know it exists and you're excited to learn about it, that stands out way more for me than somebody just sending stuff because they haven't even put a second thought into it and thinking that it's that easy. Like, take the time to read the description, but reply to it in a way that we understand where you're coming from.
Well, and also I was to say too, like, to Bonnie's point, in my experience working largely at one company, the person who's in charge of going through the resumes at the time, from HR to the audio director, is going to change. And so you really don't know, even at the same studio, what kind of fit that team is looking for at that time. Some studios might be like, we want someone that we know is going to like drive super well if the team is really fun. Some studios would be like, oh, we really want this down to the letter. And like, you have no idea. You have no idea what they're thinking. Just put your best foot forward, be honest and professional, and promote all of the good things you do know, I mean, like, it is frustrating to get those ones who are just like, I played piano. But then when you get down to a stack of things that it's like, sometimes only, you might only get a few resumes and you're like, this is it? Like, there has to be more people, especially if it's like an entry level position or something like that. Or like, a great one might be like, well, I'm a studio engineer or a theater engineer or something. Like, we had a great sound designer that came from theater because it's a lot of the same stuff. And like, something that I really value about a team is when we all have really wildly different backgrounds, because it makes us really strong. So you just don't know what they're thinking. Like, don't get into their head too much. Don't put the cart before the horse or make excuses, just be like, hey, this is who I am. This is where I'm really strong. And also, like, you can always lead. This is the best advice I ever got, because in college and high school, they're like, write a 2-page cover letter that says all of your skills and yours. Like, nobody wants that. What they want is, I'm so excited about this position. I played X game and I love whatever about the sound. Or like, I'm really excited because blah is a great studio. Like, they want to know that you like their studio
and they are passionate about it. And if they somehow hint that they don't, like, if it's clear that they've never even been to your company's website, bad sign. If it's a studio you're actually excited about and you know any of their titles, mention it.
Definitely.
I've gotten resumes and cover letters where they mentioned the wrong studio.
Oh no.
Good Lord. Oof. If you're going to be a cookie cutter person on templates, and nothing against templates, everyone uses them, make sure the data's right. Make sure the name of the studio's right, and the actual job position is the right one.
Just take that extra 5 minutes, double check. Also,
let somebody else read it, and don't call yourself a diss singer, because that's an easy one to accidentally do, is to call yourself a sound singer and not a sound designer, and that's not going to go very well.
Yeah, so designer, right, please.
I actually, like, on the subject of like a job posting that you don't exactly match, but you apply anyway. So when I applied to, for 5 years, I worked at a casino game company called Every. And when I applied, I only had like a few months of contract work under my belt and a bunch of student games. And that was literally it. Like I did not have, I had less than a year of professional experience. I had pretty much nothing. But when I first saw the posting for the audio designer position at Every, it didn't mention, at least the day it came up, it did not mention any sort of like, you must have this many years of experience or anything like that. So I was like, okay, awesome. I'm putting my resume in right now. Here's my demo reels. I'm good to go. And then I checked back a week later and they had added a line that says, must have 2 years of experience. And it definitely wasn't there before. So they put that there as a way to kind of weed people out.
Mhm.
And I understand it. The thing is that every time, or at least my understanding is that every time an audio post goes up, it gets overrun with applicants. These jobs are in very high demand.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you got to play into that. If you think that you would be a good fit for something,
Mhm.
and you see that like, oh, they want you to have X many years of experience first, or this many shipped titles, or what have you, but you still think you'd be a good fit, throw your name in the hat anyway. The
Yeah.
worst they can say is no.
And I want to,
I was gonna say it's something that we haven't touched on. Well, there's two things, but I'll just do the first one really quick. Is your online portfolio and your online presence are also really important. So make sure when you're applying, because the first thing they're going to do is Google you.
You will be Googled.
And if the only thing they can find is a picture of you throwing up in the toilet on your 17th birthday, that's probably not good. So like build yourself a professional Twitter and more like a professionally focused Instagram, LinkedIn. You don't have to be like on there every day, but like have something, and make sure that you have a website that they can go to that has whatever it is that you have. Even if it's not that much, like just have something like with your resume and about you, and ideally some stuff that they can listen to that's your absolute best pieces, even if it's only 1 or 2 pieces. But that's also a really important thing that you want to have.
Yeah. I have one thing going back to the AAA thing. Whenever someone says you must have shipped something, it doesn't have to, it's okay if it's not a game. It can be, heck, like my tripped AAA thing example was pretty much the production of a zombie opera that took 2 years, and the grants and all the work that went into it. That was the final product that actually replaced that need on my resume, because I hadn't shipped a title that big, but I did something that had an audience, had a deadline, went out and was live and got reviews too. And I had all of that documentation on my website that I could link to, like, here's the thing, the final product, a teaser, and boom. Demo reels, someone did ask about demo reels. I feel like we kind of went around showing your best work. One piece of advice I have for if you're making demo reels, there is never going to be a demo reel that covers everything you can do that will appease everyone. So don't stress out too much about putting the entire world into 2 minutes or less, because that's kind of what it's going to come down to when you send someone a reel. If they ask for one, their time is limited, because we've said sometimes hundreds of applications come through and people have to listen to all these segments. If you're going to send a reel with a job application, make sure that those samples in that reel fit what they're looking for. If it's a company that does only car racing games with, I don't know, machine guns, do not send them your cartoon puppy and cute cat reel. Send them stuff if it's actually in the right genre. Show that you did the research and know who you're applying to. But if it's a generalist position and it's a studio that has fluffy bunny games and cars and something else, and that is in your skill set, sure. But just always play to your audience with your auditions and your it's okay to have 50 reels in your back pocket. I have just different
make them easy
resumes.
to find.
Yeah, just make it easy to find and pull up when you look for them. And if you have a website, label them. Like if you have links to different types, put a little happy little label on it.
Yeah, especially if you're applying for a lot of positions, that's an easy thing that you can do. Like, here's my commercial cutting demo reel. Like, here's my and like, Bonnie's got a lot of skills, right? Like she does voiceover, and like Emily also does music. Like
Yeah.
you can put all those things in there separately.
Like I don't
implementation.
send my voiceover reel to singing jobs. I send them my singing reel. And depending on if it's a country thing, I only send them a country music reel. I don't send them the opera music because I know they don't do that. Or if it's a game where I just did a thing where I had to do monster voices for someone and also contract someone else to do the male monster voices, we sent them our critter examples. We did not send them us reciting Shakespeare. We sent them specifically what would fit what they're looking for.
So
it saves time. It saves so much time.
I'm actually I just dropped a link in the chat to, so Power Up Audio is a indie audio outsourcing company. I believe they're based in Vancouver. They did the sound design for Celeste, and
Yay.
as well as a bunch of other things. And anyway, they do I think like every other week, they do a show called Real Talk. And if you plan on making a demo reel, I beg you, please watch like a couple episodes of Real Talk. So what happens is that in every episode, somebody submits their demo reel as well as their website, and then Kevin Regamy of Power Up plus a guest, which could be let's see, Austin Winnery. Looks like there was an episode with M. Halberstadt, who did the sound design for Chicory, which just came out. I bet that one's really good. Yeah. Anyway, if you plan on making demo reels, please watch some episodes of this. You'll hear professionals giving feedback on other people's reels. It'll give you ideas. I every time I mentor a student, I always tell them to go look at this first.
And I will also chime in that another great thing that you can do is if anyone's ever heard of the demo derbies, there's an event that happens both at GDC, which is the Game Developers Conference, which has an audio track called, and as well as Game SoundCon, which is coming up. They have the Game Audio Network Guild gang runs a demo derby where they have a group of panelists review people's demos that they submit ahead of time, and they give them feedback in front of the audience. So it's great experience for both the person who has submitted something and they get to have honest feedback given to them. But as an audience member, you get to learn through them what the information they're getting. And both of you kind of learn how to respond positively to feedback, because I've been to a demo derby where someone obviously had never been critiqued before. And it's like, oh, you have to learn to take criticism in this career.
Oh yeah, and it's gonna be heartbreaking.
It's hard.
All the time, even now.
But
15 years in.
It happens all the time.
You just gotta really practice saying, like, when someone says something, even if it hurts your feel. I mean, obviously, exception for jerks. If someone is like straight up being a jerk, and you react badly to that, then maybe they shouldn't have been a jerk, you know? But for good faith feedback that hurts you a little bit, you just have to get really, really good at saying, okay, and insert follow-up
okay,
question.
And it's the improv thing, right? Always be yes and, or yes, thank you for that feedback. And how would you want it changed? What are some good examples of how you might want it changed? Whenever you start working as a sound designer or a composer in the business, learning how to speak audio to non-audio people becomes like a whole new thing.
Yeah,
you have to learn how to translate
people.
this to the non-audio folks. And one thing I've learned that I'd love to share, it's not even on the questions, is when possible, do not have an audio editing feedback conversation. Do it in a video chat or in person, because people's way to describe how they want something. I've been in meetings where they're like, you have it like, psh, but I was going more like.
People love to use mouth sounds.
I use mouth sounds all the time.
I am pro mouth sounds.
Yes.
If that's what gets your point across, then oh my God.
And sometimes that's it. And I've been in meetings where there's 4 people spitting at each other. We can't do that so much during COVID, but
you video call spit away.
But it works. And the other thing too is YouTube is free. Finding if they have examples of something they want, and it's like time marker 4 minutes and 20 seconds into this one clip. Great. Make sure you know why they like that time marker. Is it that is it they want it to be symphonic? Is it because the explosion is really rich there? Or is it because there is one little note that an oboe plays exactly at that marker, and that's the only thing they want from it? And that discussion is so much easier to be had in a direct conversation than back and forth, like, wait, what do you mean? It's like, no, 1 millisecond into, do you see what I mean? I don't think that solved much quicker in a chat.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning. So I've been working with the audio team at Arcane, and very, very little of my job involves interfacing with the rest of the team. It's really just all audio people all the time. And I just want to mention that it is possible to have a job where all of your critique comes from other audio people, and it's great. It's so good. Like, it's so specific and so actionable.
It is really specific, but it's also just like so specific. Sometimes I'm like, oh wow, it's like you really get that specific mind meld. You're like, all right, actually, I've got all of the info now.
Once I did work with somebody who was like, I was getting critique from another audio person, but it got like too specific. Like, you should use this preset, like specifically. It left very little room for like actual creativity. But
yeah,
I'm happy to say the team at Arcane, like,
something.
Their feedback is always like, it's actionable, it's specific, but there's enough wiggle room for me to still have like fun with it.
Yeah, and something else that you can think about when you're doing anything where there's criticism or teamwork is, there's always a lot of different ways to do things. And if you've had to work with clients, or like when I worked as, like a post engineer, you'd actually send them a couple of different like alternates, like here it is with X music and Y voiceover or something like that.
Yeah.
Like you give them like a couple, there's a lot of theories you can get into about what types of things you present to, or trips about like how you present things to different kinds of people. But it's a good space to sort of get yourself into, because it's like, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. So you can get yourself a bit excited about like, what are the different ways that I could approach this problem? And sometimes that could help remove a little bit of that, like, oh, but I worked so hard on it. Because sometimes I work really hard on something and I'm actually just too tired and I needed to stop. And it sounds like trash. and I roll back, or I get there the next day. I'm like, this is terrible. I need to start over. I need to approach it differently. Or just like, it's like, oh, they liked X or Y, There are different ways to approach everything, and that's a good skill to sort of start.
And I think also limiting yourself to not always go full gung ho, especially early in a project.
Yes.
And to only do things in chunks. Like on some projects, even with sound design and music, there's a period that I call thematic exploration. And it's just figuring out what meshes with the art and everything else they have going on, and limiting yourself to like maybe a 20-second chunk and doing a couple options, not putting a ton of time into it, but enough so you can see, is one of these 3 paths the right direction, and then build on it, instead of spending 10+ hours on each one. And again, hours and time and deadlines, right? So, but if they're like, well, none of those 3, and we were actually thinking, can you do a 4th? And here's an example. Maybe, and you save so much time of backtracking, just narrowing it all down. But learning to make tiny little options. I always like sending a set of 3. 3 always seems to work better than 2. And sometimes the only difference is 1 layer's muted in 3. And that's the magic step. Like everything mushed together, but we just needed to kick that violin out and boom. But they like having stuff to choose from and compare. Also, in all fields of audio, when you're making any sound, never delete versions of anything. Always save and properly number stuff, because it happens all the time. Version 1 after 20 variations is sometimes their favorite. They forget it's their favorite because they've heard everything else. You label version 1 as version 25. That's it. We nailed it. Always save everything. Told me that in school, still relevant today.
It actually touches on something I just mentioned briefly, is it's really important to be organized too. So like whatever organization theme you come up with is probably okay. And like when you get to a studio, they'll probably have their own that you need to adopt. But like, it's really easy to be like, just label it FYZ, whatever. Don't do that. Trust me. Don't do that. Come up with some naming scheme that works for you until you have something better, and just always do it consistently so that you know. To totally take us back to another thing that is important that we haven't mentioned is a good intro that we haven't touched on is QA, probably because none of us came in through QA. But getting it in through QA is a totally valid way to enter the industry and get shipped titles.
And can you explain for people who are unfamiliar, what is QA, Danny?
QA, also known as QV, is called quality assurance or quality verification, and that's the game testers. And so that's the fun job of testing something over and over and over again to see what is broken and why it's broken, and often it's broken state. And it's definitely a place where you can let your interests be known. Like if you specifically love audio or have audio experience, like be very loud about that. And the audio team would probably love to have you, because you can train any, good diligent QA person for audio, but a lot of audio people or a lot of QA people are contract terms and they come and go. And so like, if you can start with someone that already has an audio background, then it makes it a lot easier to get them trained up. And like, then you're learning the tools, you're at the studio, you're networking, like you're being a part of that process. It's not necessarily a direct way in always. And there is some debate about that too, right? Because if you go to work for work on say a Guitar Hero, right? Like they want their QA people to stay in QA forever because it's very audio specific. But it's a valid way in that like I did not know about when I started out. And it's a good one. So yeah.
And it's also great because as I've worked in-house, and often audio, unless you're friends with the QA team, can be left on the curb when they're playing something over and over again. Because you'll see QA teams and they've had to play the same level 14 times, and they'll either have their headphones off or they have a personal mix of whatever favorite podcast is going on in the background. And if you are doing audio and the team is like that, try to pop by once in a while and make sure they're actually listening. Or if you have the luxury to with scheduling, make sure you're part of the QA timeline whenever they hit that, so you get to listen and make sure all the things that you created are actually playing where they're supposed to. There was an example of this once where I was working on a game and they released it for iOS first, and then they did the whole, we'll just port it to Android, and they didn't tell me about it, and a whole QA phase that wasn't lined up with the stuff that I was scheduled to work on happened. The game was released, I played it for 20 seconds. I'm like, the intro music is missing, half the sounds for most of the battles are wrong, and what can we do a patch update? How much time do we have? Give me some headphones. Put me in the schedule.
I would love to pretend things like that have never happened, but they can happen.
They happen.
Yeah.
And it's just
audio QA is really important, and the audio team is they're always advocating for it. It can be a good one. And also, like, even if they're like, we don't need an audio QA person or something to focus, like you can still try to like find someone on that team that's willing to like not necessarily coach you directly, and they may or may not go into that own, but if you're like, hey, I'm really interested in this, like, is there any software that like you guys really love? And like, maybe they'll send you their favorite videos, because it can also be a good road into like, this studio always like has a lot of people from X school, or really loves X type of program, or like really focuses on XYZ. And so in a way, like if you're sort of forming that relationship, you're sort of like training to be the type of designer that they foresee is a good fit, and that might work out in your favor. Totally. It's a good relationship to have.
I feel like I definitely don't disagree with anything that y'all have said. I think what y'all have said is on target, but I do feel the need to mention, just because I would feel bad if I didn't, is that QA is low pay and it's grueling work and it's very thankless. It's really rough, and it's a shame, because QA is so important. It is so important to the work that we do, but they routinely get treated pretty badly. So if you are considering that as an option, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying that, hey, know that up front, and if you get in there and it's just terrible, and if you decide that the cost is too great, then find something else. There's always another way.
I'd say that's even more reason, like I always say, when you're working on a team, especially if you're in there physically, make some allies and be supportive of departments that work with you. Get friendly and get to know what type of cupcakes the IT and the QA department like, because they work their butts off.
So many cupcakes.
I used to make blue screen of death cupcakes and I put blue icing and little white scribbles on the top.
That's cute.
But it's like show them that you care and try to learn more of what they're working on and how their system works, and be genuine in it. Don't fake things like that, but actually try to be supportive of their department, and it'll happen back to you in kind. Because if you never talk to each other and then suddenly you're like, hey, my sound isn't playing, why didn't you point that out? It's not going to be a good confrontation instead of a collaborative experience. But bribes never hurt. Just be genuine with your bribes.
Yeah.
And don't give people chocolate if they're allergic and stuff like that. Like learn what their allergies are. Oh gosh, there's still so much stuff. Is there anything else we want to do? We had production or tools or other. Want to do production? I think
How much time do we have left?
we have 20 minutes left if we go over a little bit. So people watching, we are allowed to go 15 minutes over. There was a quick thing. We kind of touched a little bit on what is the big difference between working in more like film, and in our career, all film and other things that are stuck on a certain path and never deviate. Film, cartoons, movies, that's a linear project. Games are a non-linear project in that there's pathing and things can happen and loop different ways, and people can fight or stay on a login screen or go on a mini quest. So other than those quick examples I said, and specifically in the audio realm, how is game development different than working on a movie or another linear type project?
Yeah, so the big
For people
thing
who aren't familiar.
Yeah, so the big thing you're going to want to know is it's going to be, there's going to be some sort of engine that controls that. There are non-game things that have engines too, but those are good things to know and learn. And those are usually going to interface with the middleware that just controls your audio and plays back or determines how it's going to play back and why and when. So your big engines are Unity and Unreal, and then there are others, including proprietary ones. And then your big middleware. Go ahead.
Some studios build their own engines too.
Yeah,
so
I'm on a proprietary engine.
Yeah,
for example.
That's what that means.
Yeah. And then there's also your big middleware are Wise as the biggest one, and then there is still probably some people on Fmod. And
FMod's still a thing. Fmod is definitely
especially for
still
car
a thing.
stuff. Like I guess like Fmod is a bit better for car stuff, but you can
for
download
boats and engines and things that are very
I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but from what I've seen, most AAA studios use Wise. And quite a few indies use Fmod. Obviously, that's not the case 100% of the time, but most of the time, that's generally what I've seen.
Yeah, so you can definitely download those programs and learn them yourself.
For free.
Use on projects as long as you don't sell them, and the sales are like tiered, so even if you do work on a small game, they can be pretty affordable.
Actually, there are levels of both Fmod and Wise where you can sell the final product, and as long as the budget is like dirt cheap.
I think it's $100,000 right now for Fmod, maybe if it's under that.
Yeah, or like something like under 10K, like look up those numbers. But if you are making a tiny little game on a shoestring budget or no budget at all, and you want to sell it, you probably still can. Just double check those numbers.
Yeah, and we actually had a side question. Somebody had asked before, is there a place or way to learn about how to use Wise if you live in Mexico? And the websites I've linked in the chat, you can learn the whole set of Wise tools for free. You only have to pay if you want to get certified in the course that you're taking. So I highly recommend that. And as far as I know, from my limited locational understanding, you would probably in Mexico just want to, if you need to talk to a rep, talk to one of the reps from the Americas. And there's also a really useful help system. Everyone there's really friendly and usually quick to answer any questions you have. Also, there's places online that you can learn. There's this Game Audio Institute, the School of Game Audio, and conferences like Game SoundCon that have workshops where people do work on Wise and learn how to do things from a beginner level. So there's a ton of things you can do without actually having to fly or drive or register anywhere.
Yeah, and there are a lot of schools that are offering really good programs. Like Berkeley has a really great online program, and I think that they go through Wise. Art Institute uses Wise now. I'm not sure if those are available. All of those courses are available online.
And Gina Donowitz, if I can name drop, teaches at Berkeley, and she's fantastic. I highly recommend learning from her.
Yeah. And there may also be an avenue if you want to do some personal research. There are a ton of bilingual audio engineers out there, so you may be able to find someone that works at a game developer that is bilingual. Even though there isn't as many studios in Spanish-speaking countries, there are some, and definitely more in Spain as well. But you might be able to even find someone if that's something that helps you. The person is listening to us in English and asking questions, so assuming you have a good fluency. But if that's helpful to you, that's probably something that is available to you.
Yeah. Ironically, all three of us live in Austin, Texas, but we do not have a direct resource to Mexico to share with you.
That's actually, I'm glad to ask that question, because now that's something I'm going to make sure that I know.
Now I want to know.
Yeah. And I think it's I think it's really encouraging that no matter where you are in the world, obviously, language barriers are a thing, but there are so many ways to learn this stuff without spending a lot of money or having to be near a major hub city, you're not restricted by your location.
Mm-hmm. And what helps too is there's a software angle to working in games that I think is different than most other projects like theater and film. In addition to the engines, a lot of us have to learn how to use version control, which is a constantly updated and shared live by everyone database. Often a game is all loaded into something like SVN. You might hear the name Perforce or Perforce, depending on who you talk to, thrown around. I'm sure there's a bunch of others. GitHub is also used for things like that. And what it is everyone has access to the same game bank where all the assets get hooked in and all the code. And depending where you work or what your hookup is with your team, you can even pull down versions of the game and test the latest one on your machine. But learning how to use things like that is very valuable. I recommend, if you're unfamiliar with the term version control or want to start experimenting with things like GitHub, if you're on game jam teams, I've seen people use SVN or GitHub on those. Try to encourage that when you can, or do some digging and see if people can give some introductions on that. It's just a term that I learned that was new when I jumped from theater right into games and had to wrap my brain around it a little bit. But if you've ever used Google Drive and you've uploaded a file and it's like, this is going to make version 2, is that okay? And you go, sure. You have suddenly done a version of version control, because you can go back in time, right, on a Google file and pick up version 1 of a file. And it's the same kind of thing, except on a much broader scale. And once you get into that, file name stuff like Danny was talking about becomes very important, because if you miss one character on an upload,
oh my God, naming structure in general for a gaming project is a big deal. Really you would be surprised how often something not being named right can, or not establishing a good naming structure can really stick with you, especially in games now, we used to ship it and that was it. But everything now has got a live component, and so
it's
I used
DLC pack number 402.
Well, or I worked for years and years and on nothing but live service for the most part on Star Wars, and so that game is getting ready to hit year 10 soon, I think.
Wow.
So you have to think about supporting something like this for X number of years of development, 2 to 7 years, whatever that is, and then at least a year or 2 in live, but possibly even further depending on the type of thing you're working on.
So if you're setting up your project, if you're naming your files, you should name them as if even if you don't think this is going to happen, name them as if you know for a fact that somebody else is going to have to look at those files and parse them.
Know what to do.
It's not like you need to have the most perfect efficient system in the world, as long as they can kind of look at the name of a file and grok what it is. I actually worked one of the first things I did at Every was go through all of our old music from past games and archive it. I had to take
I've had to do stuff like that before.
Yeah.
Oh, it's mind-numbing sometimes.
It is.
You learn when there was no system at all, and people are like, final one, final really, final really.
Well, or
there was a lot of that, but then there had been somebody who had worked at Every in the past who wasn't there by the time I got on, and their naming convention was, I don't even know how to describe it. It had random letters, and then every song had a name, a name. like they titled all of the songs
Which is
instead
never
of
good.
saying what they were for. And
Like they had code names or something
Yeah,
that went to a
and-
sheet that nobody knew about.
So
and it
let's
was just
add-
like,
let's
I
add
don't,
on to the skills documentation, everyone.
Yeah,
When
don't do that.
possible. Also, just because there's a game design doc, hopefully, for the game that you're on that you are added to, it doesn't mean that they've added a sound section or an audio section. When possible, get your claws in there, type it up. And if you have some weird cryptic code system that identifies how your stuff works, write it down, because
Yes.
you never know. You might get sick for 3 months and be hit by a car and some other person has to hop in and pick up where you left off. Make sure, like Emily said, someone can jump in and quickly understand what the heck is going on.
Well, or
and if
like
it's
you-
funky, it's funky for a reason, and there's
Yeah.
a plan.
Or
Yeah.
you might have to like pass it, to people outside your studio too, right? Like Microsoft Excel will be one of the most important pieces of software you ever use. But I mean, for example, say you're going to get music assets from a composer and they all need to have a specific name, or you're going to get VO assets from a post house. You guys need to have like rock solid names that go back and forth so that X line ends up with the right, ends up with X audio and in the right language, right? Like games get localized as well. A big game could get localized into, 20 languages in text and 3
it
in
happens
VO.
all the time too.
Yeah.
So you might have to go through everything. There might be a point where everything has to be easily compatible if it's thrown into a folder with EN or SP or something else and the paths work, or your files have to tack that on somewhere. So EN is pulled up only when the English version comes up, but it can't break the system. You have to know before you break your stuff, know what it is before it's broken so you can put it back together. I don't know. Are you guys able to run to, if we go till 20 after, is that cool?
I
Or
can
do
do
you
that,
have to-
yeah.
Yeah,
that's the latest that's the latest I can do. I've got a meeting after this, but we got so much stuff here. Gosh, sound effects. Here's a good one. Do you tend to prefer recording original sound for your sound effects, designing from synthesis, or starting from libraries? I'm sure this depends.
I want to talk about this so much.
Because I was going to say both of you guys love field recording. I love Foley, but
it is all of the above.
It is.
I think
Yeah.
it is all of the above, and actually
It depends on the sound too, because you
The answer is
don't
it
necessarily
depends,
want to
really.
synthesize a footstep.
yeah, and also it
and we
depends
all
how
don't
good
have
you
the
are with
same-
synthesis.
Well,
That's
there's
fair.
also it depends how particular you want to get. And one example I gave to, I was lecturing for Game Worlds a couple weeks ago, and I said, all right, if there's a game with robots and tanks, I personally don't have access to a bunch of real robots or tanks in my house, but I have some wonderful libraries which already have those recorded. And since I'm usually working on lower budgeted productions that can't afford to ship me out to an army base to record said tanks, I will use those. But I've also worked on a project that was very book heavy. It was called Lexica. And there was a lot of very tactile sounds of moving pieces of paper and different sizes of books and pages flying up in the air. And it was so much easier to recreate those myself and get exactly the sound I wanted in front of a microphone than going through a library of someone else just doing random page flips. So really it depends. And it's kind of whatever fits the job, does it fastest, and makes it unique enough and special for that game that it gets the final desired
Yeah,
across.
I mean,
Totally.
I think it's good to like make your own library for a project
If
as
I have
well.
a pile
Either
of one of my piles of Foley files again.
well, like either literally recording it or just like making like, we talked a bit about concepting for something, right? So like maybe you're like, these are kind of the things that we think we want it to sound like, like it's glass and leather and mud, and it reminds me of X movie, but an X time period. And those are the things that inspire me, and sort of like pull those together, or sort of like you can like use different effects change to sort of give something a certain sound. I mean, if you're lucky enough to work on a good sized team like I am, like we have people that like have preferences or like really good skills in each one of these things. Like I know a lot more indie libraries or like unique libraries, and I know a lot about like recording, but some of my coworkers are amazing with synthesis. And so like we can kind of put our heads together, and like they can like record a bunch of that. I can take mine and we can combine them, or we can wish them together with plugins. And it doesn't have to be either or, but also part of being on a great team, or like, Bonnie is saying, like, I know so-and-so is really fast with whatever skill.
Yeah.
Like if you know someone that's really fast, I can always use them as a resource as well. If you want to like, have them pull some stuff together for you, or if you just need advice about like getting a certain plugin or a certain program working, there isn't necessarily like a one way to do any of these things.
And I know both of you are field recording happy people, especially Emily. You run, what's the Friday night field recording?
Friday Night Foley. Well, I know we're using the term Foley very loosely, but
Foley is always a very loosely used term.
I think it's I think it's anytime you act out stuff with your hands and create something not from just digital. Though you can do Foley digitally now. Like you can do a footstep keyboard of feet being recorded and act out feet. I mean, that's still Foley, I think, because you're physically hitting something with your hands.
Well, that can be good too. Totally. I mean, like there's a lot of things you can do if you map like, you know, sounds into something and then you run it through like, you know, some sort of effects chain. You can get effects chains to be pretty specific. Like I saw, what was the game with all the little robot? Was it Horizon Zero Dawn? Had like the robot creatures that attack you. I think that she does a bunch of
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, there's a great GDC talk with the sound designers, and she does something where she actually can like almost basically generate these sounds with just a certain amount of inputs. And I've worked with sound designers that get stuff like S-Layer or what's the other one?
I love
Sound.
S-Layer.
Yeah, S-Layer's great, or Sound Leaf or other things sort of put together with special content that will basically just generate certain types of powers or explosions. So making sure whatever you use that you find a way to make it unique, especially in a game where you're gonna hear something tons of times.
Oh my gosh.
Making sure it is not sound. The idea is that, you know, 6,000 stereo's footstep window break one every single time.
I mean, look, like you kind of have to decide like what part of the game do you want to like put the most creative energy into. And if you end up having to use like straight library sounds on like, I don't know, whooshes that don't happen very often or something, then like sometimes that's the choice you got to make. But for like stuff that's really, really important, stuff that you really want, that you know that your player is going to hear a ton, and stuff that you really want to like give your game the most character, that's where you want to focus your creative energies and the time you have, for sure.
Yeah. And a quick for everybody who's watching the panel, I dropped a couple links here on some places to start building libraries. There's some affordable collections of various types on Sonus. They also make something called the GDC Audio Pack. If you sign up for email list, every year when GDC hits, they share 2 gigs plus of free sounds for you to use, royalty free. So go experiment, go crazy with that. And Sound Ideas is great. They have a lot of pro libraries. And Krotos, when you guys are talking about effects chains and making monsters, Krotos makes things like, you might have heard of Dehumanizer, which has been used on things like Stranger Things to make the Demogorgon noise. That's all done with human voices and other creature sounds, put through a whole bunch of crazy synthesis to make the best beasties imaginable. I think they even have some free demos, so I highly recommend checking those out. I think we're down to the last couple minutes.
Also, Hall Stretch is free and it gets used more often than I would like to admit. And then there's another website. Is it A Sound Effect?
Oh yeah,
it might be, yeah.
And if you sign up for their email list, they also send you bits. What's nice with a lot of these companies, everyone, if you sign up for their email list, they often send out for free little samplers, and they're royalty-free packs of booms or hits or the latest monster thing. And it's great because as long as it says royalty free, once you have it, you can use it in your projects and everything else without having to worry about copyright. So remember that phrase.
Actually, speaking of Boom, they give away a few free sound effects every month, and they are one of the big premier libraries. So that is a good one to sign up for.
Yeah,
that is a good one.
Like if you're getting into the organized mindset after I saw you about organization, make a little filter in your Google email for sound effects and start building your email-based library so these don't just go to your spam. Because there's some gems that come out sometimes.
You can also crowdsource stuff. So say like actually like me and Emily and a friend of ours, Erin, just got together and we all recorded stuff together, and then we all had a little library of stuff that we could all use together. Was that the toy one? Yeah,
oh my gosh,
that was so much fun.
If you guys have a link about how you created that to share, that would be adorable, because I love that.
We have a link, but like that's
it's on a Twitter feed somewhere.
Like you could just like get together with your friends with whatever microphones you have, like, and everybody bring some props and record together, and then at the end of it you'll have like a little library of totally your own stuff, you know?
Yeah, and that's a good way to learn.
Great
And
way
if
to
you,
learn.
and it also it's a great way to make unique crowd sounds too. So if
Oh, that's true.
once it's safe for everyone, please be responsible, etc. Social distancing, ... Be careful. Doing crowd noise and walla. Anyone here who works in film a lot might know that term, as whenever you hear indistinguishable people like murmuring or having conversations in the background. We use that a lot in games too. It's not just in film, because there's a battle in the background of people hitting each other with swords, or a game takes place in it's a dating game and everyone's inside a fancy restaurant and you want to hear like those little silverwares going and people having polite yet pompous conversation. Recording that live with friends, and heck, even during quarantine, you can easily set up a Zoom call like we're doing right now, have everyone recording on their own side, mix all those channels together and make crowd sound that way. Like, just because we're currently being very socially distant and safe doesn't mean you can't do group sessions. A lot of great softwares out there. Like I said, Zoom, as long as everyone records on their own. Also, I want to do a shout out to Jamulus. If anyone's ever used Jamulus, it's being used a lot for group reads and other such things these days, and also live online choirs, as it has minimal lag, and you just have to make sure one of your team has a designated server. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but since a lot of folks in Sound Girls are gearheads, I think you would understand. But what's neat is every person, like imagine on this Zoom call, we each had a mixer in front of us and could move sliders up and down to who we actually wanted to hear, and we could control how much lag we had. That's what Jamulus does. So times are changing and there's tons of cool stuff out
I'm
there.
excited to learn about this, actually. Thank you for that.
I'll have to like next time there's a rehearsal, Danny, I got to get you in on that, because I did a couple concerts with them. There's a group called C4. And if anyone wants to learn about, I'll actually share that as well. They did a write-up teaching people how to set up their own Jamulus servers. So it's this group. You can watch some of our concerts. If you watch through over time from the first YouTube one to the end, you can see how we learned how to be a little better on sync. But softwares like this are making it so much easier to record and collaborate with teams who want to, whether it be vocals, singing, walla. I think we're probably going to be in quarantine, everyone, for probably another year at least. So learning more about these types of things to take advantage of, and often they're free. It's great. And also later in life, having that experience of, hey, I know how to use a remote server to do a group recording session. That's one of those skills you can highlight whenever you show how you're a valuable person on the team. Boom,
and
boom.
honestly, like even when, if we ever see a post-pandemic period, I think, I like to think anyway, that this time that we've all been spending in quarantine has hopefully taught people that, like, hey, you know what? There are things that we don't necessarily need to be in the same room for. You know, maybe we should be investing in talent that isn't necessarily in the same city as us. So I hope that we'll still be using these programs and we'll still be able to bring folks together for these projects across great distances. I think this tech is going to be used regardless of how bad the COVID numbers are. So I think it's definitely worth learning.
Yeah, and I highly recommend, I think let's wind down. I'm just going to shout out again.
And I'm just like spamming things into the chat, crowdsource as I think of it.
I highly recommend, there's some great panels that you can watch that we had this summer through a thing called BGM Together. I just put the link there. I helped host one about arranging voice collaboratively online for soundtracks. There's also some great ones in sound design, working in the industry on music and audio in general. It was free this past year. It might be free again, assuming things are still quarantined. I assume it'll be online again this coming spring. Game Sound Con is coming up, I believe, in October or November. I highly recommend attending that. It's all online this year. Keep an eye on GDC and Game Sound Con for those global, what's it called? The demo derbies, which we shared earlier. And I think those are the big ones. Also, I think Sound Girls will probably want us to mention that they have a conference coming up in December. So I guess watch the Sound Girls thing for that. Danny and Emily, I might be trying to draft you guys if you want to do a longer version of this again.
I could be down. And actually, before I forget, so we got so many awesome questions.
So many.
And
oh my gosh.
we did not get to all of them at all. So I'm going to go ahead. I just dropped my email and my Twitter handle in the chat. If you either have a follow-up question or you asked a question and we just didn't get to it, hit me up. I'm always happy to share my perspective. This is like my favorite thing to talk about. So
Yeah,
please,
and thank
feel
you
free to get in
guys
touch.
for, and we're glad that you guys sent so many questions. Like the fact that we couldn't hit them all is awesome.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
really
just-
great.
It was great to see so many people interested in this field. So, thank you. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everything, but
We did run over by 20 minutes though.
We,
so that's pretty
we
neat.
ran over and we still didn't get
I'm
to
telling you, we
everything.
could talk about this for like 7 hours.
There's just
Yeah.
so much.
But thank you,
There's a lot
thank
of
you, young
things.
girls.
Yeah. There's also Tonebenders podcast.
Oh my
And
gosh.
there's a new podcast that's just coming out called Let's Talk Audio. And that one is it's more audio, but it's audio and it's women and minorities only being focused on in that podcast.
Oh, nice.
And there's some really cool things going on with them, but those are great podcasts to check out. There's other audio podcasts, 20,000 Hertz, but
Yeah.
and I think there's a game audio one and I can't think of the name suddenly, but I'm sure you can find it. Everyone
There's
here
a
is probably
few
very smart.
game
Oh.
audio ones.
And I have actually in 10 minutes, I'm in a board meeting for NATF, which is the National Audio Theater Festival Foundation. And we run the Here Now Audio Fiction and Arts Fest each year, which is a vocal specific festival. And we started adding gaming and interactive media into the panel curriculum in the last 2 years. So I'm sharing the link for that. You can watch pretty much almost all of the talks, panels, and presentations on their website. Right now, we just had our conference last month. So there might be some little tidbits in there if you want. Also follow that so that you can register next year. Also, in Here Now, if you have audio you're proud of from video games or mixing or bands or podcasts, there's a competition every year to get highlighted called the NATF Playhouse and Podcast Palooza. So follow that and submit stuff because I would love to see more women and ladies and everyone send stuff in because it's usually very guy heavy. So please send us stuff. But yeah, oh my gosh, we talked a lot.
That was a lot.
Honey, we have to go.
We have to go.
I know
Thank
you have another meeting in like
I have
5
another
minutes.
meeting. I will say thank you. Please, I think they're going to share all these links with everyone afterwards.
Yes, someone please save this chat history.
Yes,
for
save
everyone.
this
Yeah,
chat history,
please.
Carrie, please. And thank you for asking us to be here.
Yes, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Yay. I don't know how to end the talk.
Do we just end?
I
we
don't know.
just-
Maybe I guess
we
we
just
just